Hey everyone, we have an equations and inequalities solving quiz tomorrow in class, and so it's because it's a long weekend, getting ready for that, I gave everyone an assignment to work on, so I wanted to kind of do a few problems with you in the video, left you a few to try on your own that we can talk about it in class, so let's jump right into it. The first page is a lot of solving, and because a lot of middle school classes teach a lot of solving, in Algebra 1 in high school, we're trying to get us to multi-step equations. And so I wanted to talk about a few that may throw you for a loop. This first one, better start by multiplying 4 to the other side. And then, of course, we can just use our opposite of adding and subtracting to figure out what value would work for that. And we end up getting 7. And 7 makes sense because if you plug it back into the original equation, you end up getting 7 plus 1 is 8. And 8 divides by 4 to be 2, which is exactly what you were trying to get. And so that's how a method of checking your work. Now that could be a little longer process, I guess, when you're doing variables on both sides. And so if you notice with number 2, I've highlighted some first steps for you to consider. I really like putting together like terms. As soon as I see them on one side, for example, 5x plus 6x, 11x. On the other side, 7x plus 3x, 10x. And now it's just combining like terms on the opposite side using some of your opposite operations. And so once you're all the way down to x equals a number, you can figure out what value solves each one. And so if you were to plug -8 in for all the x values originally, you would basically determine that the left side would be the same as the right side if you were plugging in -8. And I'll leave that for you to try. Number 3 is very similar to what I did when I subtracted 10. I'm wanting to subtract 5 to be with 7. And then I'm wanting to also put the constants together, subtract 6, and you get 2k equals -14. And then that last step so often is division, because when you see this coefficient 2k, that represents multiplication, and the inverse of that would be division. So to find your answer there, we had to divide at the end. Similar first steps here, -7x plus 3x, that gives us -4x, 9 plus 7, 16. And then on the left side, this really ends up giving you 0. And so a few different things you could do. I would probably just add 4x over, even though those aren't technically like terms. Technically 0 plus 4x is 4x. And then we can divide that back over to figure out that x is 4. So I'll leave you with these last two to try. Really think about multiplication as a start for this one. Distribution may be a good start there. And then just try to get x by itself with number 6. If it's something that you're struggling with, consider no solution or infinitely many. That may be a help to you. So the next thing I want to talk about is solving inequalities. It says choose the inequality value that falls in the solution set. So we really want to remember, when do we flip the sign? We need to flip the sign whenever you multiply or divide by a negative across that inequality in the middle. So for example, if I want to solve this really small one-step inequality, I would need to divide -2 across this less than sign, but that would change its direction for your solution to actually be greater than whatever that divider is. So let's kind of jump into a few. For example, the first step here is I want to subtract 1 to the other side to get -32. And then I want to divide by -4 to learn that x better be sign flip greater than 8. So one thing that you should really watch out for is this says choose a value that falls in the solution. And so this is any value that's greater than 8. So 7 is not greater than 8. -50 is not greater than 8. I know we're really tempted to pick 8, but there is no permission for it to be or equal. It has to be strictly greater than 8, and so that means the only answer for this one would be numbers like 90. 90 would be greater than 8, and that would end up being a solution. So for the second one, I've gone ahead and distributed. I'm going to subtract 12 to the other side, and that gives me -48. Write that a little cleaner. And then again, when you divide negative 6 to the other side, this inequality in the middle is going to change directions, and it should be any value less than 8. And so again, we have values like 10 and 9 that are, obviously on the wrong side. But again, you don't want to pick 8 because you want a value that is strictly less than 8. If you were to plug in 8 here, it's going to give you exactly negative 36, and we don't have that permission for it to be or equal, so it has to be strictly less than that solution. So let's do one that's kind of a longer inequality. I'm looking at distributing the negative 5 in the first case, and then everything else seems to kind of copy over. And then I notice that these two values are like terms that are on the same side. So negative 5 plus 5, that'd be 0. So then I start thinking, well, let's try to put the variables on one side. So let's subtract 8 from one side to the other. And you get something that basically, when you divide, you get 1. Now, this is a case where you should not flip the sign. 32 was a positive value that was being divided, and so that sign should stay the same. It's only when you were to multiply or divide by a negative across that inequality that you would have gotten something different. So I'll leave number 10 for you to try as your own review, and we will try to go over that in class before everyone takes their quiz. Number 11 and 12, these are both compound inequalities. Gave you one of each. One we have is more of an and problem, meaning that 6n minus 9 is not only less than negative 15, also, and it's greater than or equal to negative 33. So we're looking for the values that would basically keep the 6n minus 9 output between these two values. So we're going to start by adding 9 out of the middle and over to both sides. Divide both sides by 6. And basically any value that's between negative 4 and negative 1, including those numbers, would solve the original compound inequality. So again, values like negative 3 or negative 2 or negative 2.5, any value in the middle would be a solve for that. Now when we look at number 12, this is the opposite of and. This is an or problem, meaning we're looking for values that solve one or the other. And so, not always, but a lot of times these end up kind of graphing in opposite directions. And so we can kind of see that once we subtracted 10, 13 minus 10 is any value greater than or equal to 3. But when we solve the second one, after you add 5 over, you're dividing by a negative, which again is that rule change. You see that I've put that sign change in a different color. And so any value less than or equal to negative 9 would solve the second one. We talked a little bit about solving literal equations, so I thought we'd just kind of do one of these by itself. Really, your ultimate goal, it says, is to solve for y, meaning you want like only y on one side. You're moving everything else to the other side. And so the first thing I want to do is move this 2x by subtracting it. It's currently adding with negative 7y because it's a positive value. And so once I move that number over, really watch out for that negative 7 to still be negative. Some students just put 7y there instead of negative 7y. These are not like terms, so that should not have given you 19 or 19x or anything like that. We just simply move the x to the other side. And now we're going to divide negative 7 away. And I'm going to divide it into each of these. And so negative 2 over negative 7 really simplifies to positive 2 over 7 with the x there. And then 21 minus 7 gives me a negative or minus 3 in the equation. So now you have solved for y in 2 steps, and you should still have x in your answer because it has more than one variable. Number 14, we call the circumference formula 2 pi r, r being the radius of a circle, and the dashed line represents the perimeter of a circle or the distance around the circle, and that's what we call circumference. So pi is always involved in circle math, so we want to recognize when we are given something with pi as something that's associated with circles. And so it wants us to solve for the r. Now 2 and pi and r, they're all multiplying together, so we can divide 2 pi away. And so we now have a formula for r, as if we knew the circumference of the circle, we could calculate what the r would have to be. And so now you've got r by itself, and you have followed the instructions. You have solved for r. Absolute value. So absolute value often has 2 answers, not always, but normally. It could have no solution, and rarely it has 1 solution. For example, the absolute value of what is 0, that is only 0, no possibility for 2 solutions there. So you could have 2 solutions, you could have 1 solution, or you could have no solution. Those are kind of your 3 possibilities there. But oftentimes you have 2 answers, and so there's a method in which we solve them. Once you have just the absolute value on one side, we can split the problem and solve what we have that's the same without the absolute value, 5b plus 6 equals 19. Or if you want to solve for the second possible solution, we need to set it equal to negative 19, and that's because there's 2 potential ways to calculate the absolute value given you 19. Either it was positive and it didn't change, or it was negative and that absolute value changed the sign to ensure that it was positive. So you won't always get integers on these answers. Let's go ahead and subtract 6 from 13, divide by 5, and so one of your answers is basically 2.6 or 13/5. But when we solve the second one, we end up getting a negative 25 when we subtract 6, and that does give you an integer of negative 5. Now, one thing about the next few problems is anytime you have a number on the outside of the absolute value that is, anytime you have other than the absolute value, any numbers around that absolute value, we need to move that number over to the other side. You shouldn't split the problem until it's just the absolute value on that one side. So notice I start by dividing by 4, and then I split the problem. So I'll let you kind of practice solving the problem with what I have here. We'll check your work in class, but really making sure you understand how to approach the procedure of solving it. The next one, this 9 that's dividing, I'm going to multiply 9 to the other side to get positive 36, and then I split the problem for solving. With this one, let's start by adding 3 over. That would be negative 117. And then we could also divide negative 3 over. Make sure you do not distribute. It is not possible to distribute into an absolute value. That is not good. So when we divide this by negative 3, let's see, that'd be 33 would be 99 plus another 18, so 6 would be 39. 6x plus 3 equals positive 39, and you can now split the problem. So you may have thought that was going to come out to be no solution, but it looks like some of your negatives cancel out, making that problem possible to solve. Talk about slope for just the last 2 minutes or so. Rate of change, or average rate of change, using my formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And so it looks like for this one, you're going to end up getting 0 over 20. And we really want to make sure that we understand that that is 0. Don't leave it 0 over 20. I'll let you try the second one on your own. And what slope is really doing is it's calculating how you get from one point to another in terms of its rate of change. How much is it going up or down every time you slide over once? And so if we can see the graph, we can count, well, this went down 3 and right 2. So that would be my slope, negative 3 over 2. This one seems to be going down 2 and over 4, and so that would simplify to negative 1/2. And you can really see that down 1 over 2, down 1 over 2 when you analyze each particular graph. Remember that horizontal is 0 slope, and that a vertical line would have an undefined slope. Okay. And then the last question is about solving out of the slope formula. If you have a particular slope outcome that you want and you're looking for a particular part, we're going to sub in all of the values that they give us and then attempt to solve for what would make that particular value possible. So -1 equals 3 minus y. On the bottom, you end up getting 3. So let's see if you can solve for y with the rest of that. Good luck, and I hope you study. We'll see you tomorrow.